What's up guys, hope you're having a good day. So we're doing something a little bit different in this YouTube video because this week's fights that take place on the Ian Garry versus Carlos Prates Fight Night card, they're very complex, which means in the breakdown video for this card that I uploaded to YouTube, it takes me 3 hours just to cover the 6 main card fights. And obviously if I were to include my analysis of the prelims, you know, that video would probably span 6 hours long at least. And I know that these times are tough. We're all having to work very hard. We're all having to put in more work than ever to try and put food on the table, to pay our bills. It's real tough going. So if you're anything like me and you work all the time, I know you probably don't have 3 hours to sit down and watch a YouTube video. Now if you do, and if you want that high level, very detailed analysis of how a lot of the fights are going to play out this weekend, I will leave a link to that video in the description below. But this video is for those of you that don't have that time, you just need something quicker. Maybe you've placed your own bets and you just want to see how I feel about some of those matchups, or maybe you're playing DraftKings, maybe you're playing some picks tournaments and you just want that quick high level overview of the card from someone that obviously has a very long history of making money betting on this sport. Been betting on this sport for over 15 years. I've made a profit every single year that I've bet this sport. I'll make another profit this year betting the sport in 2025. We're just going into the very busy summer schedule. I obviously specialise in live betting on the UFC. I'm the best in the world at it. And very recently, we went on a 6-event winning streak, live betting UFC events. So very confident it's going to be another huge summer for us. And it all starts this weekend, a very, very busy summer betting campaign. So in this video, what we're going to be doing, smashing through every fight on the card, give you a very quick overview. I'll talk for 1 to 2 minutes about every fight on this card, and then hopefully you're going to find that useful. If you do, please hit the like button below. It would mean a lot. The growth on YouTube is so slow and it takes a long time to produce these videos. Not so much this one, I'm just driving, got about an hour's drive, about to cross a bridge in a minute. It'll look beautiful, the Severn Bridge connecting Wales to England. So this video is easy, just hit the camera and I'm just going to waffle on about these fights this weekend. But yeah, the other videos, the in-depth ones where I sit at the computer, we show you the fight footage and that, they're real time consuming. So if you can hit the like button below, that would help me a lot. Subscribe if you haven't already. And also, just before we get into this, just know that even though these are just very quick 1 to 2 minute brief, like very brief summaries of how each fight is likely to go, everything that I'm going to be talking to you about is backed up by hours and hours and hours and hours of research. Of course, if you look at the other breakdown video, it's 3 hours long. You see the level of depth that I go into, but this is just the short, concise version, right? This is the too long didn't read version for those of you with busy lives. Yeah? So here we go, let's get into it. One more thing, obviously I don't have my computer up with the exact odds and everything like that, so I'm going to be working from memory. I know roughly what the odds are, but if they're a little bit off, if I fuck the money line odds up and stuff, it's because we're trying to drive to the airport. So anyway, first fight on this card, Jocelyn Edwards versus Chelsea Chandler. So this is a very interesting fight because Jocelyn Edwards, quite a low level fighter, always seems to find ways to make fights close. She's been involved in a bunch of split decisions. It's very rare you'll see Jocelyn Edwards go out there and put in a dominant performance, and she's even got dragged into competitive fights with some very low level opponents. So whenever I see a fighter like Jocelyn Edwards at big favourite odds, it always gets my spider senses tingling, because remember what we always say, you've got to let the odds do the work for you. And at the end of the day, betting Jocelyn Edwards in that 1.30 minus 300 odds range is almost always going to be a bad idea. No matter what stylistic matchup she's got in front of her, no matter what opponent she's facing, she's always likely to make a bad decision in a fight, which will result in the fight being closer than it needs to be. And this fight's no different. If we're using logic to just match up the strengths and weaknesses of both Chandler and Edwards, of course Edwards should be favoured. She is by far the more likely fighter to win. But she's also the kind of fighter that you cannot trust, and she will let you down. So you need to be very, very careful. So for me personally, this fight is clearly dog or pass. I'll explain to you how it's most likely to go, But at the same time, if you want to bet this fight, you have to take Chelsea Chandler. So on the feet, Edwards is the more technical striker out of the two. She obviously has very hard, heavy, impactful kicks. She's a better boxer, better footwork, better movement, more athletic. At this stage in her career, she's probably got the better grappling as well, which is saying something, because earlier in Jocelyn Edwards' career, her takedown offense and ground game was very bad. Chandler's going to come forward, that blue-collar, gritty, grinding style, trying to wear Jocelyn down. But Jocelyn should be too technical for her on the feet, too difficult to take down, and will likely get the better of the grappling exchanges as well. However, Edwards has bad fight IQ, a tendency to give up cheap takedowns, and Chandler's game, she's tough, she's scrappy, she will take the fight to her. So most likely outcome, Edwards is going to win. Edwards going to dance around her, use her superior striking to chip away at Chelsea. But clearly a dog or pass fight. You'd be crazy to bet Edwards is a big favourite. So the next fight on this card is going to be Timothy Kuwamber versus Roberto Romero. So this is Romero's second fight in the UFC. He got a bit of a rough deal in his debut. He had to step up, fight David Onama on just literally a few days' notice. So this should be a stand-up fight. Neither of these guys ever tried to grapple too much. Onama is a guy that is a decent grappler, and we've seen him in fights in the past where he probably should have grappled more than he actually did. But for whatever reason, Kuwamber prefers to stand and bang. So from a technical point of view, this is quite a difficult one to kind of cap and break down, because Romero is a guy that is making massive improvements from fight to fight. If you just look at Romero's last fight against Onama and take a look at a few of his matchups from, just 2-3 fights ago, just a couple of years ago, he's looking like a different human being. So it's difficult for us to predict exactly what we're going to get from Romero this weekend, but I do think it's going to be one of those fights that's very close. So it kind of makes sense that both these guys are in that even money odds range. I would say Romero's got more power in his hands. Kuwamber's probably a bit more technical. Neither guy ever really tries to grapple, so it's unlikely we're going to get very much grappling in this fight. And I just see this being a very, very close, very well matched fight, and it's difficult to pick between the two. I think the odds are exactly where they should be, and if you want to bet on this fight, personally, my pick would be Romero, simply because he is making big improvements from fight to fight. And I think with their past performances showing, this matchup should be pretty close. If Romero just improves a little bit, which he's likely to on his current career trajectory, he's probably going to get the job done. So the next fight that we're going to be talking about is Jacqueline Amarim versus Polyana Viana. And this is another very, very interesting fight, because whenever you've got a low-level fighter like Jacqueline Amarim as a huge favourite, I think there's always opportunities to play the other side, lean into the chaotic nature of the UFC and the mixed martial arts, and just try and bet on the lower level fighter ultimately making a mistake that costs them. And this is one of those matchups where, of course, Amarim is more likely to win. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to work that out. She wouldn't be such a big favourite unless she was more likely to win. But like we always say, you've got to let the odds do the work for you. And when you take a look at the odds on this fight, it's an absolute no-brainer that it's dog or pass. You've got to bet on Polyana Viana or nobody in a fight such as this. But there's actually opportunities for Polyana Viana to win this matchup, because Amarim is a fighter that does make a lot of mistakes in fights. She's a fighter that doesn't have the best fight IQ, has been known to slow down at times. From my perspective, whenever I see a fighter in Amarim's odds range, they should have virtually no way to lose, because their implied probabilities up in that 85 to 90% range. There's no room for error. This should be one of those fights where within 20-30 minutes of researching it, we should be able to determine that Amarim is a massive favourite and Viana's got no way to win, and that just isn't the case here. So in terms of how these two match up stylistically, obviously they both like to grapple. Viana's got a base in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so does Polyana Viana. On the feet, Viana is one of these fighters that lands hard, damaging, impactful kicks. She's very aggressive with her punches. I would give Viana the advantage on the feet, which is one of the reasons why the odds start to look a little bit wacky on this one. But we're going to see a lot of grappling in this fight, because Amarim very aggressive with the takedown. As soon as a fight starts, she comes out, she goes for the takedown. She's very aggressive in pursuing it. And so this is going to be a grappling match. Now, Polyana Viana's takedown offense is terrible. Amarim's offensive wrestling's not bad. So Amarim should be able to hit takedowns, get this fight to the ground, Viana to the ground. And the difference between these two on the ground is that Viana is very, very weak off her back. If you take her down, she'll just lie on her back, not really making much of an effort to get back up to her feet. Whereas Amarim is much more positionally aware. She understands the importance of being on top when she can be on top. She's got nice slick back takes, good back control off a body triangle. She's got decent grappling control. The problem with Amarim though is she doesn't like to strike. She's very awkward on the feet. And she's one of these fighters that if she can't get the takedown, she will start pulling guard. She wants to be on the ground so badly that she's willing to pull guard to get there. So she does give up position a lot. She does at times give up position a lot on the ground as well, because she does get overly aggressive at times with a submission. So this is one of those fights, it's dog or pass. Yes, Amarim should win. Yes, she should take Viana down. Yes, she should dominate Viana from top position. However, if Viana can win some scrambles, hurt her on the feet, something crazy can happen in a fight like this. This is one of those fights where there's no doubt Amarim's more likely to win, but this is one of those fights where you can get one of those big underdogs come through, because Amarim isn't the kind of fighter that should be in this odds range against anyone in the division. So this is clearly dog or pass. So the next fight that I want to talk about is Michael Wellmaker versus Cameron Simon. So this is a difficult fight to predict because there's not a whole lot of footage available on Wellmaker from the last few years. You can go back 2-3 years and you can see a decent amount of footage on him in one of the earliest fights in his career where he did go to a decision, but most of his fights over the last couple of years have ended very quickly. So when you look at his performance on the Contender Series, he's a very slick striker, he's very technical, gives you a little bit of Peyton Talbot vibes actually, which is interesting because that's obviously one of Cameron Simon's recent losses, so there are similarities there. But if you go back a few years to the last time that Wellmaker went to a decision, it doesn't look the best. He's not the most technical and looks a little bit flat. So both these guys are in the even money odds range, and this is one of those matchups where Wellmaker will be the more technical fighter. He's difficult to take down, he's difficult to hold down, he's got that sniper style like Peyton Talbot on the feet, but he is unproven, doesn't have a whole lot of experience going past round one, and we know that Cameron Simon is game, he's tough, and he is scrappy. He's reasonably well-rounded, he's got the cardio to go hard for 3 rounds, and Cameron Simon's always going to try and drag you into a war. So for me, it's a very difficult one to call because we've seen Cameron Simon struggle badly against more technical opponents. His striking defense isn't the best, does have a tendency to give up cheap takedowns, but at the same time, we've also seen Cameron Simon in wars. That's his comfort zone. He's tough as nails. And Wellmaker is very much unproven in that kind of fight. So for me personally, because I see similarities between Wellmaker and Talbot, obviously Wellmaker's not as good as Talbot, but there's similarities in his forward pressure, his aggression, his technique, that sniper style, and we've seen how much Simon has struggled against that. For me, I would take Wellmaker, gun to my head. I wouldn't bet this fight, but my pick would be, it would be Wellmaker in this one. Alright, so the next fight that we're going to get into is going to be Haile Alateng versus Damon Blackshere. So this is a matchup between 2 grapplers, and based on past performances, Blackshere is just a much higher level grappler. You know, we saw what he did to Cody Gibson in his last fight. He's a physically imposing grappler, he's strong, he's got a dangerous submission game, and it's going to be very difficult for Haile Alateng to match that physicality on the ground. So, on the feet, Damon Blackshere actually has pretty good defense, pretty good power in his hands. Alateng likes to come forward, put a lot of forward pressure on you, chip away at you. He's a volume striker. But Blackshere, is good at staying just outside the range where he can be hit, and he's got more power. So while Alateng probably will have the advantage when it comes to striking, I don't think he's going to cause Blackshere too many problems on the feet, because he doesn't really have the power to hurt him. Blackshere is pretty good defensively. But the thing about Blackshere, his grappling is so strong, so technical, so physically imposing, that when these two start to grapple, when Blackshere starts to try and take Haile Alateng down, I think it's going to be very, very difficult for Alateng to stop Blackshere. Now, to be fair, if you look at Alateng's record, we haven't really seen him face a grappler. So for all we know, his defensive wrestling could be very, very good. And that would make this a very close fight, because I don't see either of them as having a big advantage on the feet. Blackshere's got the power, Alateng's got the forward pressure, the aggression, the volume. But two grapplers, probably going to be a predominantly grappling based fight. So for that reason, you've got to pick Blackshere to win. He's more likely to win. Now, having said that, we always have to let the odds do the work for us. And with Blackshere being such a big favourite, this weekend, if you really, really want to bet this fight, I do think this is one of those fights which is dog or pass. You've got to take Haile Alateng in this one, or pass on this fight altogether. The next fight that I want to break down is going to be John Castanada versus Chris Gutierrez. Now, this isn't strictly a striker versus grappler matchup, because Castanada actually started life as a striker and he does a little bit of everything. He's quite a well-rounded guy, but in the context of this fight, we should view it as a striker versus grappler matchup. Gutierrez obviously has that strong kickboxing pedigree, that strong kickboxing style. He's a pure striker, and Castanada isn't going to be able to compete with Gutierrez when it comes to striking. Gutierrez, just a much higher level striker. He's got great leg kicks, good footwork, good movement, very good defensively. And Castanada, he's not that effective on the feet, doesn't have too much power in his hands, he's not particularly technical. So Gutierrez is going to have a huge advantage when it comes to striking. This matchup is going to come down to whether or not Castanada can get Gutierrez to the ground and keep him on the ground. Because Castaneda is one of these guys that, you know, does have decent takedown entries. His grappling's not bad, and Gutierrez has poor takedown defense, and he's a very, very low level on the ground. So if Castaneda comes into this fight with a grappling heavy game plan, he's got a really good chance of taking Gutierrez down, causing him really big problems. Now, the issue with this fight is because Castaneda primarily has a base in striking, he doesn't always grapple that much. At times we see grappling from him, at times we don't. So it's difficult to confidently lean either way on a fight like this without knowing what kind of game plan and strategy Castaneda is coming in with. But because Castaneda has the grappling to dictate where this fight takes place, in the even money odds range, with Gutierrez being a slight favourite, Castaneda would be my pick on this one. I'm not going to be betting this fight, but I don't like betting on guys like Chris Gutierrez who give up cheap takedowns, and if you put them on their back, they're very, very weak off their back. So for me, this one's easy. Let the odds do the work for you. Take the slight underdog on Castaneda, and if he comes into the fight with a grappling heavy game plan, he's very likely to win. So the next fight that I want to talk about is going to be Evan Elder versus Gage Young. And apologies, I probably completely butchered the pronunciation of Young's name, but Young making his debut, and he's coming in on just a few days' notice. So taking his debut under difficult circumstances, he was scheduled to fight someone else in a smaller promotion on May the 2nd, so he probably has been in camp. But obviously this fight is a week earlier than usual, or a week earlier than he was scheduled to fight, so you don't really know where his weight cut is at, all that kind of stuff. We don't really know where Young is at coming into this fight this weekend. So, you know, guys coming on just a few days notice, even if they're in camp for another fight, it's quite rare that they win. But you never know, maybe Young will be the outlier. What I will say is he's got home advantage on his side. I think he actually lives in Kansas City, so should have the crowd behind him. But this is a very, very good matchup. You know, it's a very, very close competitive clash of styles. Both Young and Elder have got, you know, decent cardio. They can go hard for 3 rounds, and they're very well rounded. There are a lot of similarities between the two. You know, neither of them have too much power in their hands. They're more volume strikers. Neither of them are easy to take down and hold down. You know, they're quite scrambly, they're quite good at working their way back to their feet. For me, this is a very well-matched fight. I understand why Elder is the favourite, because obviously Young is coming in on just a few days' notice, which is really difficult, especially against a well-rounded guy like Elder. But if both these guys were on a full camp, if this wasn't Young's debut, I would have this fight closer to the even money odds range. They're very, very well matched. But guys, like I say, coming on at just a few days' notice usually struggle. So the common sense pick here is Young. I wouldn't want to be, sorry, the common sense pick here is Elder. I wouldn't want to be betting on a guy like Young that's coming in on just a few days' notice. I think if you do want to bet this fight, you have to take Elder, right? That's common sense. But he is quite a big favourite, and as a result, he is unbettable for me. But because they're so well matched, this is a fight where Young is a live underdog. I don't see Elder as having any huge advantages in this matchup, other than the fact that he's had longer to prepare. So the next fight is going to be Jimmy Flick versus Matt Schnell. I mean, what are we even doing with this fight, guys? Like Ariel Helwani said in a conversation with Eddie Hearn on his show the other day that he feels that MMA is in a recession. And if ever there was a sign, if ever there was a red flag that MMA is in a recession, it would be this fight. What the fuck are we doing, man? Jimmy Flick versus Matt Schnell. When a guy like Matt Schnell is a big favourite, you know that there's something fucking weird going on. But anyway, Matt Schnell, Jimmy Flick, it's a fight, it's an opportunity for us to make money. Hopefully we'll be able to live bet it, because there ain't no way I'm betting this one pre-fight. Utter chaos. Schnell big favourite, Flick big underdog. This fight is wild. So when it comes to striking, obviously Matt Schnell has a big advantage. Schnell is a good boxer, good combinations, accurate, fast, you know, good footwork, good movement. It's a shame that Schnell doesn't really have any chin at this stage in his career, because offensively he's very good. He just has a habit of getting rocked, wobbled and dropped out of nowhere. At this stage in his career, you know, he's getting rocked, wobbled, dropped or knocked out in almost all of his fights. But of course, Jimmy Flick isn't the kind of guy to make him pay for that weakness. Flick doesn't really have any power in his hands. He's not a very technical striker. So that major weakness in Schnell's skill set is unlikely to cost him this weekend, which is one of the reasons why he's such a big favourite. So on the feet, we know Schnell has a huge advantage from a technical point of view, and Flick doesn't really have the power to level the playing field and make Schnell pay for being a little bit chinny. Now, when it comes to grappling, both are obviously grapplers with a base in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We know that Schnell's got a very dangerous choking game, and Flick, you know, he's got some funky submissions as well. On the ground, it's an interesting one, because it has been a long time since we've seen Schnell forced to grapple hard. You know, we've seen him use his wrestling in reverse a little bit in the Cody Durden fight to keep the fight standing, but for the most part, it's been a while since we've seen Schnell engaged in a proper full-on grappling match. And that's what Flick will want. Flick will want to get this fight to the ground. But we know Flick is quite physically weak, has a base in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, doesn't really have particularly good offensive wrestling, doesn't really have the kind of wrestling to get this fight to the ground. So, on the feet, Schnell, big advantage. On the ground, Schnell can probably hold his own, and at worst, neutralise the threat of Jimmy Flick's submission game. So yeah, it makes sense that Schnell is a big favourite. I wouldn't want to bet Jimmy Flick in this fight. Having said that, we do have to let the odds do the work for us, and with Schnell as a very big favourite, there's very little upside in betting him. So if you really want to bet this fight, you do have to take Flick, but it's not a particularly good position to put your money, because this fight, you know, this fight probably isn't going to go well for him. So now let's get into the next fight, which is going to be Ikram Aliskarov and Andre Muniz. So earlier in the video I was saying that it's difficult to gauge kind of how the Wellmaker versus Cameron Simon fight is going to go, because there's not a whole lot of footage available on Wellmaker from the last few years, and the same can be said for Aliskarov. If you look at his record, all of his fights over the last sort of 2-3 years have ended pretty quickly. So we don't really know where he's at. The last time we got a good look at Aliskarov was all the way back in 2022 in a fight against Nashon Burrell. To be fair, if you go back and watch that fight, you know, you can Google it, it's on Facebook. Aliskarov didn't look good. Looked very flat on the feet. He even gave up some cheap takedowns and didn't look particularly strong in grappling positions. So again, I will say about Aliskarov what I said about Jacqueline Amarim. You know, whenever I see a fighter that is a massive favourite, they should have virtually no way to lose. You know, within 10-20 minutes of researching them, you should be able to determine pretty easily that this guy's got almost no way to lose, and their opponent hasn't got a shot. They haven't got a chance. I don't get that feeling with Mano versus Aliskarov, and if you've been watching my channel for a long time, you know that I've been very critical of Mano. I don't rate him very highly at all. There was a point in time where there was quite a bit of hype on Mano. People were quite high on him, and I was saying, look, this guy's terrible, bad takedown offense, you know, weak off his back, you know, bad cardio, all this kind of stuff. But again, you've got to let the odds do the work for you. And with Aliskarov in that 85 to 90% implied probability range, this is clearly a dog or pass fight. Now, what I will say is, even though Aliskarov didn't look good the last time, you know, we took a really good look at him in his fight against Nashon Burrell, he has been training at American Top Team since then. And obviously, American Top Team is one of the best gyms in the world. You're obviously going to improve a lot most of the time if you train at a gym like ATT for 2-3 years straight. So I would expect Aliskarov to be a hell of a lot better now than he was in the Nashon Burrell fight. But you never know. Sometimes guys just don't improve all that much. So this is an interesting fight because we haven't seen a whole lot of Aliskarov striking. He's got a bunch of quick finishes in his recent fights, and his striking looked very bad, very flat against Nashon Burrell. His cardio looked alright against Burrell, to be fair. Andre Manois does have a tendency to slow down, so that's one area Aliskarov will definitely have an advantage. And look, I do understand the odds, right? Manois is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy. You know, Aliskarov, he is a combat sambo guy. Combat sambo practitioners, they understand position over submission. Manois is weak off his back. He likes to hunt for long shot submissions off his back. I get why Aliskarov is a big favourite here, but again, let the odds do the work for you. It's dog or pass. There's no upside in betting Aliskarov here. It's a no-brainer. If you want to bet this fight, you simply have to take Andre Manois. So now let's talk about the fight between Randy Brown and Nicholas Dalby. Now, Randy Brown is a relatively big favourite in this matchup, and I always say let the odds do the work for you. Randy Brown has got an implied probability of about 70% in his odds, but this is one of those fights where I do think the big favourite odds are justified, and I would be very, very surprised. That's a very nice vintage Porsche there. I would be very, very surprised if Nicholas Dalby were to win this matchup. So in terms of how both these guys match up from a stylistic point of view, I think this is one of those matchups where Randy Brown just has the advantage everywhere. He's a lot younger than Dalby. He's got very good cardio, significantly better striking than Dalby. I think he's a better MMA grappler as well. He's difficult to take down, difficult to hold down. So this is one of those matchups where, for me, it's a bit of a checkmate fight. If you go through all the ways in which Dalby could potentially win this, it becomes very, very difficult for him. Dalby doesn't have knockout power, not particularly dangerous on the ground. He's not a particularly strong wrestler, not a particularly strong grappler. So outside of something crazy happening, like a crazy submission, flash KO, which isn't all that likely, it's going to be very difficult for Dalby to win this. Now, Dalby, at 40 years old, has been racking up wins recently. You know, I think he's something like 4-1 in his last 5 fights, something like that. But if you look at how he's been winning these fights, there's a trend. He's facing guys that have a tendency to slow down if you put the pressure on them. So Dalby has essentially weaponized his cardio to come out, fight at a high pace, wear guys down, just kind of beat them up in the clinch, chip away at them, and then backdoor decisions by taking over in the second half of the fight. Randy Brown's got very good cardio, so it's not going to be easy for him to do that. And for that reason, for me, Randy Brown deserves to be a big favourite. He should win this fight, and if you want to bet this fight this weekend, you've got to take Randy Brown. So the next fight on this card that I want to talk about is going to be Magomedov versus Michel Pereira. Now, this is a very, very complex matchup, a very complex fight. I actually spent an hour breaking this one down in my main YouTube breakdown video this week. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. It's going to be very, very hard to summarize all aspects of this fight in just a couple of minutes. So if you are interested in betting this fight this weekend, I highly recommend you go and check out the more in-depth breakdown that I've done on this one. But generally speaking, to just give you a very quick overview, this is a good stylistic matchup for Michel Pereira because he has a big advantage over Magomedov when it comes to striking. He has better cardio than Magomedov, and Michel Pereira is difficult to take down. You may be questioning that statement based on Pereira's performance against Anthony Hernandez in his last fight, where Hernandez obviously used grappling to cause him a lot of problems. But trust me, go check out the breakdown video for that fight. I use a lot of footage to show exactly why Pereira is probably going to be able to keep this fight standing against Magomedov. So go check it out. I really, really like Pereira in this fight. This is one of those matchups where, outside of something crazy happening, like one of these guys showing up and not really looking like they did in the past, or, you know, Pereira getting flash KO'd or caught in a random bad position on the ground that he can't get out of, outside of those things, this is a very good stylistic matchup for Michel Pereira. He should get the job done. He should win. I'm pretty confident Pereira is going to win this weekend. So the next fight that I want to talk about in this video is going to be Giga Chicadi versus David Onama. Very, 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 very interesting fight. So this is one of those matchups where both guys are primarily strikers. I wouldn't expect to see any grappling in this fight. You'll see David Onama shoot the odd takedown here and there, but for the most part, both these guys are pure strikers. So this should be a stand-up fight. And they've both got very different styles of striking. Onama's one of these guys that likes to stand in the middle of the octagon behind the high boxing guard and just get into a kickboxing match. Now, obviously, Chicadi wants to get into a kickboxing match as well. He's from a traditional kickboxing background, but his approach to striking is very different. He doesn't just stand in front of you. He does a really good job of measuring the distance, controlling the distance, and using his length to just chip away at you from a safe distance. And that's really the difference between these two. Chicadi is far better defensively than Onama is. Onama likes to stand right in front of you, and when you come forward and attack him, he doesn't take a backward step. He plants his feet, stays behind the high boxing guard, and just looks to open up with big power shots to try and counter you. Giga's in and out, in and out, in and out, and just likes to chip away at you from a safe distance and kind of volume strike and rack up volume. This is a good stylistic matchup for Chicadi. And Chicadi, in my opinion, is one of the livest underdogs on this card. If you want to bet this fight, take Chicadi. Do not bet David Onama as a big favourite. Now, obviously, Chicadi is getting old. Onama is going to be one of these guys making big improvements from fight to fight. But at the end of the day, we don't have a crystal ball. We can't account for stuff like that. So when guys like Paddy Pimblett show up against Michael Chandler and look way better than he did against Tony Ferguson, there's not a whole lot we can do about that. That's why they call it gambling. That's one of the biggest risk factors associated with betting on the UFC. But based on past performances, I think Chicadi can use his length, his superior technique, his superior distance control to kind of chip away at Onama from a safe distance and use his length to evade those power strikes of Onama. So I like Chicadi in this fight. I haven't decided whether I'm betting him or not yet. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. Should I bet Chicadi? I don't like betting on older guys against younger guys. I will break those rules every once in a while. Quite often backfires when I do. But yeah, Chicadi very tempting in this one. So the next fight that I want to talk about is going to be Anthony Smith versus Mingyang Zhang. Now, Mingyang Zhang's record is insanely padded. Go check it out on Sherdog. Go check it out on Tapology. This guy has only fought an extremely low level of opponent. So it's tough to gauge where Zhang is at, because you've got to go back to like 2018 to see the last time this guy went the distance or went past round one. So we haven't seen a whole lot of him over the last sort of 5 or 6 years. And to be honest with you, he's a victim of his own success. He's very dangerous early. He's very aggressive. He's very dangerous. He's got big knockout power. His boxing is difficult to deal with. So it's not his fault that he's been starching everyone in the first round. But as professional gamblers, as handicappers, it makes it very difficult for us to know what to expect from Zang if this fight goes past round 1, because we haven't seen him go past round 1. We don't know what his cardio is like. So based on past performances, this is a very, very difficult, tough stylistic matchup for Anthony Smith. We know Smith has got a lot of miles on the clock. We know Smith is declining. We know Smith is very flat-footed and slow and not the best defensively and slow to react these days, and reflexes are a little bit off. And we know that early in fights, Zang is an absolute berserker. Very aggressive, very heavy-handed, very dangerous, true legit knockout power. And Zang is the kind of guy that will catch someone like Anthony Smith cold, knock him out early. Now, we don't know anything about Zang's takedown offense and ground game because we've never seen it. But I don't think it's going to matter too much in this fight because Smith's never been the best offensive wrestler. Smith's grappling has never been the best. So we're probably not going to have to worry too much about Zang's takedown offense or ground game in this one. But if it goes past round 1, it's virgin territory for Zang. Who knows how he's going to look? And sometimes we see these guys that look amazing in their past fights and they're getting all these quick finishes. And then as soon as they get dragged into the second round, they turn out to be a bit of a glass cannon. Everything falls apart and they get fraud checked, they get exposed. Is that going to happen with Zang? I doubt it. I think Zang's probably going to win this fight. I think it's very likely he knocks Smith out in round 1. But his odds reflect that. And again, you've got to let the odds do the work for you. There's no upside in betting on Zang this weekend. If you bet $100 on Zang, you get $18 profit. Why would you bother with that? It isn't worth the risk of losing $100. You know, if you lose a bet on Zang, you've got to win your next 6 bets in that odds range just to make a tiny little profit, just to get around break even. So be smart, let the odds do the work for you. Don't be placing bets on guys like Zang. It just doesn't make any sense. So if you want to bet this fight, I wouldn't recommend you bet this fight, but if you want to bet this fight, it's clearly doggo pass. You've got to take Anthony Smith. But I would be very, very, very surprised if he were to win. Based on past performances, Zang probably gets the job done early. So now I want to talk about the main event between Ian Garry and Carlos Prates. So both these guys in the even money odds range. Garry is the slight favourite. And this is an interesting matchup because it kind of reflects the importance of fight research for me. Quite often, when you are researching a UFC fight, how the fight turns out to be most likely to go based on your research is completely different from what you thought it would be. So now I want to talk about the main event between Carlos Prates and Ian Garry. So Ian Garry, So now I want to talk about the main event between Carlos Prates and Ian Garry. So both these guys in the even money odds range. Garry is a slight favourite, and this is obviously a big step up in competition for Carlos Prates. Up until this point in his career, he's been facing some relatively low-level guys, and now Garry is a big step up in competition for him. So there are some unanswered questions over Carlos Prates. Hopefully we're going to get those questions answered this weekend. And of course, one of the big stories coming into this fight is that Carlos Prates told Ariel Helwani that he smokes 10 to 15 cigarettes a day, and he doesn't plan on stopping anytime soon. So that's obviously a huge red flag, and it makes Carlos Prates completely unbettable for me. Obviously, his cardio has looked pretty good in his fights up until this point in his career. I might have to floor it here. Apologies, guys. I might have to just put my foot down a little bit just to get to where I'm going, you know what I mean? 'Cause I'm in the wrong lane. So obviously we're not going to speed or do anything dangerous, but don't want to inconvenience anyone behind me or around me. So I'm just going to use the power of the Porsche to get to where I want to be, which is over there. So just bear with me a second. There we go. Alright, just a little pump, respecting the speed limits, respecting road safety, ain't no issue. But the Porsche's got some power. Every once in a while you have to use it in a safe way. So we're back on the road that we need to be on. So anyway, Carlos Prates, Ian Garry. So Garry the slight favourite, Carlos Prates saying he's smoking 10 to 15 a day, and yeah, that's That's a big red flag. It makes Prates unbettable for me, and I really hope this fight goes deep. I really hope we see it go 25 minutes, 5 rounds, because I want to get a look at Prates' cardio. Obviously, if you're smoking 10 to 15 a day, your cardio is most likely to be very, very bad. So I want to see if it's very bad. I want to see how it looks. The thing is, Prates, a little bit like Zang, is a victim of his own success. He's been finishing most of his opponents so quickly, we just haven't had an opportunity to get a good look at his cardio. So in terms of how both these two match up when it comes to striking, Prates clearly has more power in his hands. He will be landing the harder, more damaging, more impactful shots. Ian Garry, more of a volume striker. Garry, had some knockouts earlier in his UFC career, but for the most part, he's evolved into a bit of a point fighter. Now, the big difference between these two is that Ian Garry is far better than Prates defensively. A lot better. Prates' boxing defense isn't the best. He actually eats a lot of clean, hard shots, and this is one of the reasons why fight research is so important. I had the perception of Prates like he was a very slick, elusive, technical striker like Gene Silva, but in actual fact, even though he is very technical and very slick, his boxing defense isn't the best. Gary's defense is masterful. Similar to Giga Chicadi, Garry does a much better job of managing the distance and using his length. So what's interesting about this fight is they're both going to be able to fight in the range in which they feel most comfortable. Garry is a counter striker. He likes to be on the outside, chipping away at you. Prates is a pressure fighter. He likes to come forward, be aggressive, lead the dance. But what's interesting about Garry is that he doesn't really get phased by pressure. We've seen guys walk him down. We've seen guys pressure him. And he's quite comfortable just to use his footwork and his movement to kind of circle away and chip away at you. So if you look at Carlos Prates' fights in the UFC against guys like Neil Magny, guys like Li Jingliang, what you'll notice is these guys, Magny, Li Jingliang, they're not comfortable facing pressure fighters like Prates. So he overwhelms them with pressure, and then they get caught like a deer in the headlights, trapped up against the cage, and that's where Prates can start to uncork his big combinations, break them down, inflict a lot of damage, and really hurt them. So this fight's interesting because it'll be the first time we see Carlos Prates face a guy that's very comfortable at dealing with his style, and someone that can fight on the back foot, land strikes effectively, moving backwards. We haven't seen Prates face that style in the UFC. So on the feet, it's interesting because Garry will likely be landing more volume with his jab and his leg kicks. Prates will be landing harder, more damaging shots, but it's possible that Garry could outpoint him by a wide margin. Now, when it comes to grappling, we haven't seen a whole lot of Prates' takedown offense and ground game. We've seen flashes of it here and there. We haven't seen anyone really test Prates' takedown offense and ground game. Now, will we see Garry test his takedown offense and ground game? It's possible. We saw Garry use a grappling heavy game plan against Michael Venom Page. But the thing is, Garry's not the best offensive wrestler. Garry is not a natural wrestler. He's predominantly a striker. He lacks physicality when it comes to grappling. So unless Garry's offensive wrestling is very good and Prates' takedown offense and ground game is very bad, I don't see a whole lot of success in this fight for Garry when it comes to grappling. However, obviously Garry has very good cardio. We've seen him go, 5 hard rounds with Shavkat Rakhmonov, and he's battle tested, he's proven. Garry may struggle to have success with his grappling early on, because Prates is a strong athletic guy that'll probably be difficult to take down and hold down. However, Garry may be able to use his grappling to wear Prates down. It doesn't matter if Garry gets the takedowns early, just forcing Prates to exert energy to defend those takedowns may enable Garry to put money in the bank, tire Prates out, and take over later in the fight when those 10 to 15 cigarettes that Prates smokes a day may start to catch up with him. So what does all this mean? Who do I pick? Who do I lean towards? Well, for me, there's only one side in this fight. There's only one pick. There's only one guy you should be betting. That is Ian Garry. You cannot touch Prates with the fact that he has admitted to smoking 10 to 15 cigarettes a day. Garry is battle tested. We've seen him go 5 hard rounds. We don't really know a whole lot about how Prates is going to look past round 2. Gary lands a high volume of strikes, technical striker, better defensively, and probably has the edge on the ground as well. So Gary is an absolute no-brainer pick this weekend. If you want to bet this fight, take Ian Gary. So I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please leave a comment below. If you'd like me to do more videos like this, maybe for even every card, leave a comment below and let me know that you found this useful. Please also hit the like button if you haven't already. Like I say, the growth on YouTube is so slow. So many people do these videos that it's very hard to grow. So if you gain value from this, you know, listening to someone talk about these UFC fights from a betting point of view that has literally made a profit betting on the UFC every single year for the last 15 years. Every single year. Don't listen to the jabronis in the comments. Check the results page on my website. Listen to what I'm saying, the depth that I can talk about these fights in. You know, check out what we've been doing in our live betting group over the last 10 years, where we've made a profit on almost 70% of events, right? I'm the best in the world when it comes to live betting on the UFC, and I really, really hope that you gain value from these videos. So hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. I've arrived at my destination, just arriving at Bristol Airport. Here we are, Bristol Airport, here we go. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you, I love you, I hope you crush it this weekend. I hope you do great, I hope you make a lot of money, but for now, that's gonna be it for me, boys. Just going over this Mount Kilimanjaro fucking speed bump. There we go. Do you have speed bumps in your country? Probably do. You got them everywhere in the fucking UK. But anyway, love you. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Have a great weekend. Nice one, guys. Bye.